Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. I'm Ralph Ben Murgy. Welcome to Not That Kind of Rabbi, my spiritual podcast where I talk to people about, that side of life we're not supposed to talk about. The two things you're not supposed to bring up at any dinner party are religion and politics. If you want a good buzzkill for a party, just say the word God. Unless everybody's really well on their way to the next dimension, they're not going to want to have that conversation. Even when I was a kid and we were, partying, as they euphemistically called it, we never really talked about that kind of stuff. And if you talk to everybody, everybody has a different answer about that word. So what's God to one person is not God to another person. A lot of the times you end up with the kind of Santa Claus version, the naughty and nice list and the white guy with a beard and sitting on a throne. So that's kind of when you leave religious talk in pre-adolescence, adolescence, and never come back. Kind of like my producer Mike. He went there and he just never came back. He just decided, forget it. This is not for me. It's like Woody Allen's line, death, I get it. It's just not for me. That's the way that rolls. I don't know about you, but I think I've already bent a few curves on this pandemic thing. We sort of got through the first blush of it. Everybody behaved well 3 months. And then we all start to get a little mental health check going. I don't know how much more of this I can take. Thing is, we got to take a lot more of it. And we need to kind of center ourselves in the middle of all this because there's this, for instance, that whole mask thing that's going on, particularly in the United States, and equating the not wearing of a mask with freedom, when really masks are not to protect you from somebody infecting you, it's from you infecting somebody else. So really it's an act of compassion and caring and love. And they've reduced it into an act of violent aggression against the rights of someone to do whatever they please, regardless of whether or not it affects other people. So I find myself very sad for my American cousins at this point in time. And I find myself wondering if there is a redemption for America in its present form. I mean, I try to remember that just a short 3.5 years ago, Barack Obama was the president of the United States. But the chaos of this administration, the evil of the actions, the kind of there's a fantastic play by Bertolt Brecht, who was a German playwright who emigrated to the United States when Nazi Germany was in its rise. It's called The Irresistible Rise of Arturo Ui. If you know Brecht, it's because Kurt Weill used to write the music to his Broadway plays. Mac the Knife is the most famous song because Bobby Darin did something with it. But Brecht himself was a highly political writer, and he wrote The Irresistible Rise of Arturo Ui, where he conflated Al Capone and Hitler. And he made the central character someone in Chicago, in the suburbs of Chicago, who rose through the ranks of the criminal underclass as a produce king and started having people pay him protection money. And then finally they got to the point where they were being violent with people. And then they crossed the border into killing people. And by the end of the play, this character is standing on the balcony and delivering a Hitler speech, just with this raving, powerful speech. And he has become a crazed autocrat. And I can't help but feel that these days, even with a virus that is agnostic to what you believe and what you care, the virus doesn't care what you believe. If it's going to kill you, it's going to kill you. We end up with the kind of, if you notice, the highest incidence of virus spread are in autocratic states with hard-edged rulers, and in some cases, murderous rulers. That's where it's spreading the most. Brazil, the United States with Trump. It's just so hard to get your head around it. But spiritually, it leaves me in a place where I vacillate between feeling that we have an opportunity to do something here, that all the rules are off, which is in a way good because we can sort of snap out of our stupor and figure out what to do with the rest of our time with 8 years to go before climate change overwhelms us. And the other part of me just feels like can we not even just do this? Can we just simply stand 6 feet apart, put a mask on indoors, wash our hands? Is it really that much to ask of people? So I'll leave you with all those thoughts. Uh, Hawksley Workman is my guest today. I'm not that kind of rabbi. And we've never met. We've never met. I've interviewed a lot of people in my life. The Hawk, I have not interviewed. So I just want to start by saying it's nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you too, Ralph.
Um, any thoughts on some of the things I was just rambling about?
Um, well, like I said to you before we went on air, because there was some talk of ending one's life oneself, and I had this feeling that you and I were going to have to talk about that for some reason or other. All of the things that you just spoke about are all part of a big sort of an ongoing apocalyptic narrative that has sort of been part and parcel to my waking existence for the better part of my adult life. And so I've had a doom and gloom element to my character for such a long time that, to be honest with you, very recently I decided to put it down because I couldn't carry it any further. And it's not adding any value to my life. And at 45 years old, I'm having these sort of hormonal shifts, I think, that occur when you are in your midlife. And like my next record is called Less Rage, More Tears. And I watched my dad move from rage to tears as he got older. And I'm doing that now, too. So I don't want to carry this misanthropy any further. I don't want to carry this feeling of nothing is worth anything because we're all certain to be headed to hell in a handbasket. Because I'd carried it for so long, and I'd done so much. I'd so much of my life I'd busied in order to sort of to create a soft place to land. I was trying to outsmart the apocalypse, and then I think recently it's like, well, that's just pointless, and I'm just going to try and find an ounce of joy wherever I can, even though the better part of my, my intellectual mechanism is fixed on all of the stuff you were just talking about. But I'm just trying to not be so abruptly dour about it all the time, because it doesn't make you a good husband either, and it doesn't make you a good person to be around. But I I've had really dwindling faith in humankind for such a long time that I don't remember the other setting, where there is that sort of hopeful part. And I thought it was interesting what you said about compassion versus this new aggressive freedom narrative, which is such an odd part of what is kind of coming out of the U.S. these days. This I have a right to whatever I want. I have and the citizenry, when I think if that is if that is the fundamental maxim that drives your instincts, I think that and especially for a country that is so evangelical, that some of the Christian tones that we all might have been able to sort of agree on, the compassion, the creation of a situation that's better for the all as opposed to the single. Like, I guess if you think about it, there's an Anton LaVey sort of satanic element to this might of the one and crush the all. But it doesn't get talked about very much. But a lot of stuff doesn't get talked about when it comes to the United States. And I think, sadly, I think that the baseline education of your average American or North American, really, like I think the problem is that we have maybe slipped a little and allowed a very persistent and very insidious pursuit of a, like I have always called it the great cultural dumb down, and we're all sort of a part of it to some degree. Where there's I know that, when I think back to my major label days, I think, oh, there was the times when I was trying to get on the radio, or the times where I was making decisions that were in order to try and fit into a hole that might create a bit more commercial success, and that is my sort of small way of being complicit in this great sort of dumb down. But I think in the U.S. It's in retail, it's in entertainment, I mean, it's here too, and I'm not trying to be disparaging by any stretch, but when I look and when I try to look past some of my my knee-jerk reaction, which resembles a more hateful my hateful instincts pop out, I try to rekindle some of that compassionate sensibility, which is really that some people just maybe aren't quite smart enough to think certain situations through in a way that they could arrive at a place where they would have a creative or constructive sensibility or solution for the myriad of problems that sort of face us at this particular point in human history.
Well, there's a lot in what you just said. Um, One of the things that I find interesting is it sounds like you're making a conscious choice, which, at the best of times, if we want to alter the way we see the world, it's really difficult to change those lenses. But that you somehow have either willed yourself to a different place or have decided that you're going to. You see, in spiritual terms, sometimes we decide either we're going to conquer the beast or we're going to befriend it and walk down the path with it. Where are you at? Are you in the I must conquer this or I must companion this?
I think uh, I think probably I need to companion it. I think that conquering mentality goes along with my less rage, more tears. Like in my younger, angry young man, or angry young artist days, um, the the order of the day was to smash through all the walls in front of me in order to try and create some sort of success narrative for myself. you know and as you sort of apply that kind of thinking to your life outside of what my music career was, once you're sort of married and settled down and things are starting to kind of your life takes a new shape, and I've created a bit of success and for myself, and so I think I start to look at how I can stay self-reflective and ready to pivot within the course of my belief system, and to try and stay open to things, because I am also quite hard-headed about stuff. And but yeah, I don't think I need to crush things anymore. I think I'm trying to befriend these. But I feel, in particular, what's happening with the Black Lives Matter and Indigenous Lives Matter, there's been a sort of a renewed sense, at least I'm feeling, that you have to sort of consciously, in some ways, disassemble some of the ideological mechanisms that you've just taken for granted all of these years, and have an honest look at that stuff with the toolbox out, and have a willingness to be very conscious within the purview of that landscape, in order to look at the way you think. It's something hit me about 10 years ago, where I was under the assumption that my my character, the person I am, that and somehow I am in control of who I am, of how people perceive me, the person that I am out in public, the person that I am with my family, that everything that comes out of my mouth, everything that goes and seeks to sort of create and establish the picture of the human that I am somehow in control of. And then you have this bizarre moment where you wake up and realize that you're just a series of learned reactions to stimuli that, it's 45 years in the making in my case. And so it terrified me to think that I wasn't in full control of Hawksley Workman, the guy, the character, the human, the person, the personality, that all of that stuff was outside of my 100% control, that that really these were just this was just an assemblance of learned and trusted sort of rhythmic reactions, something that I no longer have to think about, and my personality just operates within under the energy of its own forward movement. And I don't know
Mhm.
why that terrified me, because I thought for all these years that I was in unique control over all of this stuff. And then of course you wake up and realize, when my wife gets, miffed at me for getting angry at a certain thing that makes me angry every time, and I get vocally angry. It's like, man, where did that come from? Why can't I weed this one thing out that would create more harmony in my daily life? But for some reason,
We
you know,
don't.
you just don't, and that really irked me. It irked me because I think I had expected a lot from my parents. I expect a lot from the people around me. I expect them to have a very acute set of parameters when it comes to sensitivities, and just self-reflection. And
I want to talk a little bit about that idea of, it sounds like an issue of control.
mm,
You're kind of talking about the people in your life, they should have some control. And you
hmm
disappoint yourself whenever you don't have control
yeah,
over
man,
things.
that's exactly right.
But, the old joke is, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans,
Yeah.
right? Because we don't really, this isn't a spiritual life is actually about surrender as opposed to control,
mm,
right? That the humility to be able to say, you know what, this is not actually the Hawksley Workman project. This is actually just my blink in the eye of existence
mm,
and my attempt at a prayer. The albums you make, the sounds that come out of you, the passion, it's your prayer, right?
hmm
And when people resonate with that, when you see an audience, which we've almost forgotten what they look like, but when you see one, they're in congregation with you. They're sharing that.
hmm
But it's not really about controlling that environment. It's, that your better performances are the ones you don't control, or the
hmm
ones that just seem to have happened to you,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about those ideas.
Well, I mean, it was very astute, and the idea of control, it's really, 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 really big. I definitely am keenly aware of my interest to remain in control of a lot of stuff. But I will say that the abandon that I seek on stage, and that is in some ways, I think, part is kind of my stock and trade, or my currency, is that I get on stage and let it rip. I get on stage and give it all over to this angel that you're kind of talking about. Those those 2 hours or 90 minutes on stage, 90 minutes to 2 hours on stage, I am not in my body, and it is very much a surrender to that movement. And I believe in that very strongly, and I think that is, I think that's why we're all in that room together, seeking an opportunity to leave the planet, not necessarily physically, but to leave spiritually together. And I definitely am the leader of that moment that we all choose to be together in that room. And it's sort of my job to be the chief executive in charge of letting go.
Yeah. Well, you're the clergy.
Yeah, and I feel and it's funny, when I was a kid, for me, I have no education, but my two paths, I thought I could be a United Church minister, or I could end up being a musician, because I spent time in the United Church as a kid, not because my parents were overly devout or pious in any way. I had young parents who had young kids, and I think they woke up one day when they were 20 years old each, thinking we're supposed to do something with these kids. So they shoved us in church and Cubs in the first, in the same week. And then all of a sudden and then the church was interesting to me because, the United Church in our little rural community was interesting because they sang these great songs, and there was all kinds of opportunities for me as a kid to perform. And there wasn't the guilt maybe associated with other Christian outlets. And so I had a great experience within that, and but all that to say that I carry a little bit of my instincts even for the stage from what it was about the United Church when I was a kid that made sense to me and that felt spiritual and in and of itself felt like it was a release or an acquiesce. You were there to acquiesce to something much bigger than you, and that excited me.
So when did you decide that wasn't going to be your path?
I think that music was always my dominant thing. Like as Jay-Z said, it's not the life that I chose, but the life that chose me. So there wasn't really a question, but when you're going through high school and most of my teachers knew that I was, a kind of a young little phenom playing all these instruments and singing these songs and whatever. But everybody told you, because I think that's their job when you're young and impressionable, that you should have a backup plan. And so I thought, well, I had a really good United Church minister when I was a kid, and he was evangelical about John Updike and about theater, and those two things for him, I think, were every bit as important as as the Bible, anything that could have come from the Bible. So, he would do 2 plays a year, and for me and other teenagers and like-minded sort of, nerdy kooks who didn't have other things to do, we found real belonging within this sort of church slash theater thing. And so he was a great role model, and he was somebody that kind of gave shape to my teenage years in a way that made me feel like what I was doing was special. So, but outside of that, that's why I don't think I ended up. I still think of it potentially as a retirement gig, which is terrible. It's that Margaret Atwood at a dinner party, and a brain surgeon says he's retiring and thinking about trying his hand at writing, and she said that's interesting because she's thinking about retiring and trying her hand at brain surgery. Without being offensive, like it's not a retirement gig. It's a full-time thing, but it still interests me.
Well, I wouldn't be too hard on yourself on the idea that you would do it in another phase of your life, because there is the phase of life where one creates through ego many different iterations of themselves. And then as one gets older, often there is the contemplation life and the reflection and the sharing of wisdom and the mentoring of people.
Mm.
So you can do that through your music, but you could do it through your music and through ministry with people as well, because there's no shortage of need for us to find people who can be the connective tissue in a society, ones who can really make it. And the music is a beautiful way to do it.
Mm.
So if I say God, what comes to mind for you when I say the word God?
Well, it's interesting because going back to what my instinct was and then what I've trained myself to think, God is oneness. My instinct, of course, I think back to the Santa Claus version of God, which was the version of God probably set into motion when I was a very young kid. And that when my brain conjures up an image at the first when I first hear that word, I think of a Santa in the sky in the clouds. But no, I mean nowadays God is that oneness. God is that connective light. God is the fact that we're all resonant matter here together, and some of it's shaped like a table, and some of it's shaped like you and me.
Hmm. So, is there a creative force that is guiding this constant creation of the universe, or is it beyond our comprehension to even hazard a guess, or is it really just things going on, period?
I think it's number two. For me, it's too big. Again, in my sad little ism is a desire to control, and I think a desire to come up with a full set of inclusive details as to what the hell is going on here. And now I know that there's an excellent chance I will be on my deathbed and have no fucking idea. So, I think that I have to hand myself over to this. That I have an ego that continues to drive me in the direction of making things. I find now that I'm even older that having a daily sense of my own value. My wife and I have been staying at my father-in-law's place because we moved from Montreal to Peterborough during the pandemic and didn't find a house in time. So we've been living here for 6 months. So we've just finished up a big tiling job. We tiled his kitchen and a couple of entryways, and we did that as a sort of a thank you for letting us stay in your house until we were able to find suitable lodgings of our own. Why am I talking about this? I've gone circuitous, and now I can't find the road. But what were we
It's
talking about?
interesting. Well, I'm finding it interesting that you went there because it was sort of like the journey of accepting that you don't know what the hell's going on here, going through your deathbed, not knowing what the hell's going on.
Right. I think I know what I
And
was.
yet, yes, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that it's funny with this midlife thing that it takes only a handful of positive things to action yourself in a day that I can lay in bed with my wife and go, that was a good day today. Like, and I think too, like, because I was always an overachiever and won awards in school and expected to come into the music business and I didn't know that the music business was going to be so fraught with so much sort of with so many humiliations that are out there. And you're in the entertainment business too a lot of years, and I'm sure that you went through a lot of that yourself. And it's funny now. I find that I just am looking to to actualize small things in the day because these days just stack up one after another, and my need to have these enormous accomplishments like going and playing some big important venue in Paris, France. Like, I can't do that every day of my life. In fact, that only happens, once a year now, if that. And so I can't have that be the fulcrum on which the entirety of the balance of my happiness rests. So now I have to do stuff like tile my father-in-law's kitchen or wash the car or do these simple things that add up to what starts to feel like a productive life, which starts to feel like I'm adding back meaning into my daily existence because I think I was a bit of a glutton for big spiritual things to happen or big life happenings. And I think when you're in the entertainment business as well, I think that's why a lot of us get into drugs and alcohol because you are a glutton for big moments to continue to occur. And when you're off the road or when you're in the situation like this where your job has effectively been taken away from you, you can't have these big glory moments where it feels like all of the angels are out singing on high and for you and all of you the great things that you've achieved by coming off stage or doing something wild like that. And I guess I'm trying to have effective but simple daily rituals that add up to me feeling like a good human and somebody who operates productively within the purview of the 18 hours or whatever it is that you're awake in the day.
You know, when you were talking about tiling your father-in-law's house, you and your wife, and I realized that I always wanted to make a TV show with my wife called Jewish Home Repair. And what we would do for the first half is look at the thing that we were supposed to fix and go, that's really broken. And then like try to do something and make it much worse. And then we'd call someone. And the second half of the show is actually how you're supposed to repair this thing. I think there's a lot of potential.
Well, to me there's been no greater who saw that this home garden television thing was going to create a lane for itself within the sort of American entertainment landscape that would be so thoroughly they would have such an enormous effect on how we live our lives and I kind of look at even the way real estate has worked in the last 10 or 15 years and even the mighty exponential growth in numbers we see with real estate in big cities in Canada, I think in some ways has been buttressed by a home garden television and this instinct that you can walk into your own situation and fix it yourself, and that any home can be taken from shabby and made into beautiful, and you can do it. And even the old Home Depot slogan of "You can do it, we can help." It's I wonder. I think you might have something, Ralph. I think that the world could really go for this. I think there is no end to watching people destroy their homes and or fix their homes. We all sit around and just want to watch each other do this. I think it's elemental. I
Well,
think we.
yeah, but it's part of the material life. The solution to life is material. In other words, in the Buddhist tradition, you have to suffering. Samsara comes from clinging and grasping. you cling to notions of permanence and you
Mm.
grasp for something just beyond the reach of what you have. And we're doing that with so many things. And what this pandemic has done is it slapped everybody in the face and said, stop already, just stop.
Mm.
Stop buying everything. Stop driving everywhere. Stop doing everything.
Yeah.
Just sit down. And it's freaking people out because they're not used to that. They're used to a life of diversion,
Mm.
and they're also, in this kind of a society. My belief is that what we have is a culture of inadequacy. You can't sell somebody something if they already have it.
Mm.
So you have to make the person feel inadequate, that they don't have what you're selling them. They don't have the song you're selling them. They don't
Mm.
have the clothes you're selling them, the car. Even if they buy the house, the one across the street, you got to admit that's a better house. So you don't have that, and so you constantly go in these cycles of need, of turning want into need.
Mm.
Right? It's not need; it's want, but we make it. Oh, but I have to have it.
Yeah.
And this emotionally driven life is it's a mug's game. There's no way around it, and part of that for me in my belief system is that we have a spiritual hole in ourselves. I moved from Toronto to Hamilton, and one of the reasons was I felt that the scale of the city had not lent itself to a spiritually fulfilling community life.
Mm.
That everybody's just like, could you get the fuck out of my way? I'm trying to get somewhere. Nobody let you in traffic. Nobody
Yeah.
said hi in a cafe.
Yeah. I know exactly.
And now, right? And now I'm living in Montreal can feel that way too, right? But now I'm living in a place that's 1/6 the size of Toronto, and when you walk by somebody, they say hello. They say
Yeah.
hello, and it's small, but it matters, right?
Well, I think now, like you said, when you've been deprived by simple hellos, I even looked into the magnetism that people were trying to express in their eyes with their faces hidden behind masks. And some of my earliest ventures out with my mask on, the intensity with which I tried to connect with the handful of people I may have seen at the grocery store or wherever else. I mean, we have really have been starved for simple hello since the beginning of this. And I think that's been a big lesson for everybody. Like you said, the slowdown has been disconcerting, but that lack of connection, and not even necessarily big walloping eureka style human spiritual connection, but the simple hello that you're speaking of. It's funny, I remember being in East London with a friend years ago, and the hellos that happened on the streets around Brick Lane, back before Brick Lane kind of looks like it looks now. Those hellos were simple and delicious and very British in the way they happen. And I always thought, like, there's something about this. There's something about a city that says hello. That it's a city that stays together, and they're in it for the right reasons, I think.
I love that. It's a song, right? The city says hello.
It could be a song. It just should be a song.
Yeah,
A city
yeah,
that says
because
hello. Yeah.
yeah, because we're starving for connection. So as a musician in this time who was about to go on a tour with Sarah Sleen,
Yep.
uh, and now ain't, and she's been on the program as well. We had a lovely time talking together, and she's doing concerts from her home. But I'm speaking to different people in different genres, and they're like, it's okay, but this is being a musician, unless you're just a pure session player, uh, without the connection to an audience, where do you get your artistic juice right now? Or are you giving that part of your life a rest?
I've created this little show called Hawksley Night in Canada, which was an idea I had years ago. I had pitched this variety show idea to the CBC, and which is funny because I know you've hosted variety shows on the CBC, and I'd pitched the idea of Hawksley Night in Canada 10 or 12 years ago to with no success. So I've built this little TV show that has stop motion animation and landline telephone calls with fans that call in, and I write songs about people's pets. And I've been saying it's like Pee Wee's Playhouse meets Tommy Hunter. And without the pandemic, I would never have gotten down to the brass tacks of making this little television show. So I'd had a TV show on the local cable network in my town of Huntsville when I was a high school student. I'd always loved handmade local stuff. Even now living in Peterborough and watching Czech's television and being a part of the local media landscape, I'm really excited about how small media can get now that it seems that media can only exist if it's enormous, that small things happening are really exciting. So my little small TV show called Hawksley Night in Canada has been where I've put my entire focus. It takes about 2 weeks of my energy and my wife's energy to make this show. And frankly, it's the way I'm getting excitement out of making stuff. And I think too, the years where you have a myopia about creating your music life and going after the fame that everybody wants you to have and that the record label's excited for you to achieve and blah blah blah, it means that you get locked into a sensibility of I'm the guy on Much Music who's dancing around in that video with a cutoff shirt or whatever, without ever just believing that without, I guess, having this full realization that an artist's life or the life of somebody who wants to make things, it can operate in all kinds of disciplines. And I feel that as I've gotten older and I got about as famous as I was going to get, and the major label is nowhere to be seen anymore, and here I am alone, and all of a sudden, in the last 5 or 6 years, I've done a lot of theater, I'd written a children's book, and I can make this TV show, and making stuff is just what I do for a living. I mean, at the center of it, it comes down to the songs I've written over the last 21 or 22 years, and the 18 records I've put out, and the 1,500 or plus shows I've done around the world. That is that's the anchor, but the rest of it is me getting to be childlike and playful, and getting to let the excited elements of the childlike parts of creation run free. And I make my little TV show and I feel like a kid, and it's really saved me through this whole pandemic thing. I moped around for about the first 4 weeks or 6 weeks, and then I was like, I just can't do this anymore. I unplugged from the television news and I unplugged from all of the stuff that seeks to kind of make us sad and angry, and I just got down to the business of making a silly ass television show in the basement of my father-in-law Don's house, and it is glorious. And I don't think it's going away. I think it's what they call colloquially a thing, and I think it will continue to be a thing. And my little Hawksley Night in Canada show is going to have a little life for as long as I wish it to. Out even when this pandemic thing finally comes to an end, I think I'll make my little Hawksley Night in Canada show.
Yeah, you have this constant pulse of creation in you. It's interesting because, in a spiritual lens, everyone has a divine spark in them. And, the Hindus quite naturally say, Namaste, I salute the divine within you. We don't do that. We just go, hey, how's it going? Right. And everybody just says, fine. You? Yeah, I'm good. And regardless of where they're really at as people, right? We don't know. Like, it's always interesting when you really get to know somebody a little more that we have this illusion that everybody else is fine. We're the one who's a bit screwed up.
Mm.
And then we realize when we get to know people, we're all screwed up. That's part
Yeah.
of the glory of it. At the beginning of what you were saying, you touched on something that made me think that, when we were talking about do you conquer the beast or do you companion it, that there's a thread of sorrow that's gone through things you've done in life.
Mm.
Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, sorrow feels like a particularly literate word. I've been just feeling like there is a blasé to it. I mean, maybe that's different. I had a great family physician in Montreal, and I just thought, I'm going to just take a little look at this thing, this gnawing discontent that just sits there, and it's always sat there. And I think it's in my mom. I think it's just been there. And that gnawing discontent when you do get to your restless midlife, where you're under the impression, especially having gone through the 90s and having gone through, you know, afternoon television became a way to identify your place in the victimhood scheme. You know, it seemed like that's what Donahue was about, that's what Oprah was about. And in the 90s, we acquainted that we were all individually had we'd been victimized somehow by our upbringing, by our childhoods, by something that had happened at school, and all of it very legitimate, because I think we were all trying to work through what you maybe called sorrow. And maybe I'm not identifying, or maybe I'm not clear on what it was you were talking about with sorrow. But I think that I woke up because I had a self-help mom, and I kind of figured that by my midlife I would have had all of these things sorted out. And here I was, you know, a successful guy within, you know, the landscape of the Canadian entertainment biz, and I was still, my baseline emotion was still drab, or still dour, or still dissatisfied. I think that's really the word. It's dissatisfied. I remember a few New Year's Eves ago, my wife had some friends at our house, and I was particularly having an ugly day, and we were sitting at the dinner table and having wine and going around, let's all talk about what you'd like for this year. And everybody has something lovely and elaborate to contribute. And I was just being a drunk grump, and I said that I just don't want to be dissatisfied this year. If I could have a year where I'm just not dissatisfied, that would be great. Which is not.
That was the bit of a buzzkill. All
But
right,
I'm
everybody, don't lie.
so maybe I'm not getting your sorrow, but I think I'm dissatisfied, and I'm dissatisfied with everything. But it makes me a good maker of stuff. I think it makes me a good. It is exhausting. It is exhausting because there are some moments that could just be simply enjoyed, whatever that is. And I think that in what and I think this goes back to what we had earlier in the conversation about, are these conscious fixes? Are these things that are these conscious, are you messing with the internal, like the mechanisms within the clock consciously? And I think that some of my conscious effort to become a satisfied person, or a person who has an ability to savor moments of joy, like doing a tile floor, to me, it's the process of going through doing the tile floor. All of my instincts want to cut corners. It wants to get done quick. I don't want to be sitting on my knees anymore. I'm tired of the lye burning through the skin on my hands. Like, I just want it to be done. But then there's something joyful about committing to the task and letting the task run your life, and I guess handing yourself over to the fact that there's a methodology to tile, and it's, you know, probably thousands of years old, and I'm just one guy trying to do a good deed for my father-in-law here, and I will create self-satisfaction by going against my instincts to rush through the job, to try and cut corners, to do something shoddy, which is kind of, I didn't come from a handy dad, you know, I've had to learn this the hard way. And then I get excitement out of the sort of this sweat equity that you kind of build into your spiritual character, you know.
Well, there's a saying, people look for God in lightning bolts that will hit them in a moment and they'll change forever. But in clergy, there's a saying that God is in the laundry.
I think it's absolutely true. Like, there's something holistic about the honesty in those pursuits. And again, that comes from somebody who had to perform minor miracles every time you go out in the Canadian entertainment industry. You've got a lot of people around you who are dissatisfied all the time. You need to have 1,000 people at the show. Okay, well, I did 1,000. Yeah, well, too bad it wasn't 1,500. It's like, okay, well, the next time it'll be 1,500. Then it's 1,500. Yeah, it's too bad it's not 3,000. And then you get into this, you stand on your head over and over again, and the people around you whose lives and livelihoods depend on you and your ability to kind of create that momentum and create that opportunity for success, that everybody gets to have that, and that really exciting pile on. When things are going great in the entertainment business, there's nothing like it. It's just a wonderful situation, especially if you're at the center of it. You're the guy whose the name is on the ticket. That's the name that's on the record, or you're the name on the billboard of the venue. Like, that's really exciting. And then there's something empty that happens once you start to predicate all of your joy on those lightning bolt moments that you talk about. And then all of
Yeah.
a sudden, there's something exciting about a 6-day procedure of pulling up two sets of poorly laid floors from the past, um, and then putting down a new floor that you're going to erase, or you're going to undo some of the shoddy stuff that went before, and you're going to correct it methodically, with this sort of delicious intention. And you want to be the one who rights an old wrong. And for me, there had been two wrong floors laid, and for me, I'm going to right those wrongs. And those wrongs were left to linger almost unseen for decades. Those floors go back to the 60s, two different floors to a house that was built in the mid 60s, and I'm going to right that wrong. For me, that is something that is exceptional, and no one has to know that. I keep thinking, when we were doing this tile job, because there's lots of things I could have maybe just, you know what, we'll just leave that and no one will notice. And there's that story about Steve Jobs talking about that Apple computers need to be built beautifully on the inside, and of course you have that luckless employee saying, "Sir, why does it matter what it looks like on the inside if nobody's ever going to see it?" And I think Jobs says something about, well, they're not going to see it, but we're going to know. And when you know that it's beautiful inside, that your happiness with your project or your product is complete. And I feel that with this tile job, and I try and have those kinds of jobs throughout what I do, and even the making of the TV show. TV doesn't get made easily. Music is easy. It's easy for me. Music, making a 3.5 minute song is easy, but making things with more moving parts, I think too, because I've been doing a lot more theater. I worked at Stratford last year with a great director, Jill Kiley, and when I did my own show, The God That Comes, which was the story of Bacchus, which had a lot of success 7-8 years ago. Theater people are an art bunch that just love to live in a constant state of process. And for a rock and roll guy who, it takes you 20 minutes to write a song, it takes you a day to record it, you arrive at a venue, you set up, you do the show, it's 2 hours long, you tear it down, everything is immediate, it's on and gone. And then when you get in the theater world, theaters are like laying tile. Like, if the tile ain't straight, well, then you pop it back up and you start again. Like, and theater people just love this. Theater people don't care about the show at all, I don't think. I think they care about taking the show apart and putting it back together again, and taking it apart and putting it back together again. And they care about the fellowship of theater, which is something, again, I had no idea, because really rock and roll is quite solitary. But I think that there's something spiritual that I learned going through the processes of theater, and that these process obsessives in theater, that I had to learn to like being out of control and being uncomfortable for long stretches at a time. It's not instinctively not what I want to do. I like things to be done.
That's very well put. Because when I came from theater into a brief period of time of being in a horrible cover band uh, for about almost 2 years, and it was just like, this is not the life for me. But when I got there, I realized, no slight to musicians, but it was an entirely different way of going about things. There was like, people were late for rehearsals. Bass
Mm.
player was always the last guy there.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, late? How could you possibly be late? I came from rehearsals for stage where everybody's on time and everybody's warmed up and everybody's ready to go. But it was always about, like, the best night was the dress rehearsal or the technical dress rehearsal before the actual opening night, before we had to give it away to everybody.
Absolutely.
We got to own it for a little while, and there was the smell of the lights just firing up, that little heat, that wisp of mild little smoke out of some of the lights once in a while. And
Yep.
everybody was in there together. I was saying to some actor friends of mine who I'm in a nonfiction book club with, I said, the thing about theater is, when people see each other and they haven't seen each other for 14 years, they hug as if they're related to each other,
Yeah.
you know. it is a fellowship. I think you have the right word for it there.
Yeah.
So where do you go? One more. We'll do one more thing. You've spoken a few times about midlife,
Mm.
and in a spiritual journey, there are seasons to life. There is your spring, your adolescence, your early 20s. Then there's a summer of achievement, and the convertible top is down, and you're driving down the highway of life, and it's feeling pretty good because you actually have your shit. And then there's the knowing that autumn is on the horizon, that the leaves will fall, and that it sounds to me like you can see autumn from where you are now.
Mm. I feel like I've been able to see autumn since I was 3 years old, and I mean that literally. A sense of my own mortality is what drove me to become a great musician when I was a kid. I practiced an abnormal amount, and I knew that I was something great was in me. I could feel it. I had a sense that it was there from when I was very, very, very young, and that I needed to serve that thing. And if my instincts were telling me that I was going to die young, I needed to realize that greatness as soon as absolutely possible. So I started to practice 3 to 5 hours a day when I was about 10 years old. At 5, I knew what I was going to do, but at 10, I started to take it absolutely seriously. Fast forward, and I'm 45 and haven't died. When you're in the music business, um, at the time that I was, and even more so now, so much of your currency is your beauty and your sex appeal. And it always was. For the Beatles, it was 4 mop tops from Liverpool before it was their music. Rock and roll is always been a hairstyle or a fashion choice before you've even pressed play on the tape deck or put the needle on the record. It's the image and the recklessness of youth that is the reason why we're all there. The rules of engagement with rock and roll are very, very clear. And I was raised in a way where I was a chubby kid, and I obsessed over beauty but never felt beautiful. And then I was in a job where I was getting my picture taken every day, and my beauty and my dwindling beauty and my dwindling sex appeal, I was keenly aware of its currency value at any given moment in the day, especially when I was signed to a major label. So I was in my late 20s, and I see my mid 20s, I start to see my hair recede. I'm like, I see it all falling apart, because a successful career in rock and roll is predicated on your ability to remain youthful for as long as you possibly can. This was part of the magic of Bowie. This was part of the magic of any of the greats who have become iconic, is that they usually retain a boyish shape. They never turn into men. They remain boys for the entirety of their careers. And without that, they don't have the same shot at becoming iconic in that kind of way, because once they become men, the element of the archetype requires you to be sort of you're partly a sexual archetype, and once that sort of boyish sexual energy changes to a man's sexual energy, you aren't played the same way on the videos. You're not part of the same youth landscape anymore. Your instincts start to shift, and you're no longer trusted by the zeitgeist that seeks to kind of pigeonhole you easily in the, well, look, you're a reckless, ready to die, ready to drink yourself to death 21-year-old singing a pop ditty about summer and being sexy in the summer with the top down. So what happens to you? And I was keenly aware that I was born with a 40-year-old spirit. As a kid, I'd always been grumpy and dissatisfied. And here I was trying to present as a sexy, young, carefree 20-something when I had the major record deal and the music to go along with it, and tried to look cute and young and sexy and happy and all of this stuff, always knowing that it wasn't really who I was, but I was interested in presenting as beautiful, as brief as it was, and interested in presenting as skinny and reckless, as brief as those two parts of my early professional career were. And I remember being on a sexy list in Paris. I got famous in France briefly when I was in my mid-20s. And they put me on a most sexy list, and I was like, it was a real achievement because there's nothing I'd always wondered what being attractive would have felt like. I was just really, really good, and the other stuff I was just hoping to be skinny and I starved a lot in those days too. I starved for the photo shoots and just tried to be as attractive, because I've been a student of pop music. My dad had hundreds and hundreds of records at home. I poured over. I knew what made somebody a star versus somebody who wasn't a star, and I knew that I had the talents and all the stuff, but I just didn't have the skinniness or the hairdo for very long.
Well, see, summer is when you have to put on the bathing suit,
Yeah.
right?
It's so true. It's so true. So my bathing suit era was short and painful. So yeah, I talk about life a lot.
Everyone's bathing suit area. Everyone's bathing suit area is that way. Women, it's just like, oh my God, I refuse to wear a onesie. I'm wearing a bikini. Screw you. Yeah. But now we're in autumn. Is a different time of life,
Yeah.
and you get to put on the baggy sweater and walk down the street and listen to Gordon Lightfoot and just feel like the sun has a golden crisp to it at that point, and it doesn't hurt you anymore.
Man, absolutely. And I feel like I talk about it a lot because I obsessed over being young and trying to be beautiful, again, just purely because it would have made me more commercially viable for a longer period. But midlife has been great creatively for me. I feel because I was raised to be very competitive. I had one of these dads that made everything into a contest for my brother and I. And to this day, I approach things that there is a winner and a loser, which is a bit sad to admit out loud. But when I go into creating, I create with the vigor and excitement and almost sporty attitude of a teenager. I still feel exactly the same inside as I did when I was young. When I sit down to write a song or make a record, I still feel like what I'm trying to do is set a new bar for myself and for my peers. And I still feel that the competitive side of what I do is exciting. This is why I work out with trainers who are always like, these young 20-somethings, and they're sadists. They just kick me around the gymnasium, and I love it because I want to bask a little bit in their recklessness, a little bit in their in that naivete of believing that it's going to last forever. And I was there. For 2 seconds, I was there. I look back and think I bought it for 2 seconds, but mostly I've been in my midlife from the beginning. It's just now my body and my instincts are kind of we're sat on the same lily pad for the first time.
Well, listen, I love talking to you. I hope we get to meet in person one day and just
Yeah.
hang out. Uh, I'm well into the autumn of my life, and you are just at the beginning of that leafless trail, which has so many beautiful things to it that don't involve bathing suits or speedos for sure. Uh, so we can both wear baggy trunks and walk down the road and have a good chat. It's a real pleasure. I wish you and your wife nothing but the best. I hope you find the home you're looking for in Peterborough, and I bless you for everything you're given. It's really such a joy to listen to someone with such insight and wisdom of their life. And for your music, and I got to check out your TV show. Where do I find your TV show?
I'll shoot you and Mike a link. I'll shoot you guys so you can take a look at it. We've tried to keep it ephemeral, but there is recorded evidence of it. But we're just not talking too loudly about it.
All right, I'll take a look. You take care of yourself, and
Thanks, Ralph.
all the best. All
You
right,
too.
be well.
Thank you. Take care.
Hawksley Workman on Not That Kind of Rabbi, and what a wonderful conversation. What an interesting man. Yet another gift from my producer, Mike, who said, I think you should talk to this guy. Mike knows me well enough. Mike, very, very good choice, sir. Very good choice.
Thank you.
You had to turn on your mic for that.
I'm always muted during Not That Kind of Rabbi.
I hear you, buddy. I hear you. But we'll do one of our I got to do some music with you. We should hang.
I'd love it.
By the way, anybody who's interested, Toronto Mike, check him out on his own podcast, because it's episode 9,572 billion or something.
Get in there.
Getting there. That's it for Not That Kind of Rabbi. I'm Ralph Ben-Mergy. If you want to get in touch with me, at Ralph Ben-Mergy is the easiest way on Twitter. Just start spelling the food salad of it at the end. You'll figure it out. At Ralph Ben-Mergy. Or go to the Facebook page for Not That Kind of Rabbi. In the meantime, I hope you stay safe and well. Let's keep it together. Let's show a little internal and external discipline and compassion, and wear those masks and keep the 6 feet. And I know it's difficult. I know it's hard, but we've got to keep it together so that everybody gets some safety and health out of all of this. In the meantime, you take care. Bye.
This podcast has been produced by TMDS and accelerated by Roam Phone. Roam Phone brings you the most reliable virtual phone service to run your business and protect your home number from unwanted calls. Visit roamphone.ca to get started.